My name is Michael Santos, and I'm really passionate about trying to bring stories into people in prison. I know that would have been very helpful to me when I was doing 26 years inside. I always wanted to find, well, what do people face when they go home? And I spend so much time sharing my story, but I think what's more important is for me to bring other people into the Prison Professors program because they're professors too. And today I get the privilege of introducing you to Cleveland Wilson. We are going to get to know Cleveland's story together. But what really inspires me about his story is that it was a correctional officer who suggested, hey, when they saw me speaking in a prison, Miss Hutchins, is that right, Miss Hutchins?
That's it.
Miss
That's right.
Hutchins saw me speaking in a prison, and she said, you really need to connect with Cleveland Wilson because he's doing amazing things. I reached out, and Cleveland wrote right back to me. So, Cleveland, welcome to our program at Prison Professors. Tell us a little bit about your journey.
Thank you. I'm so humbled to be able to sit here with you today. Well, it's just like you said. My journey is it was 10-year sentence that I was incarcerated for. I was actually there for 8 years, and it was just a place where I was able to go into a cocoon and come out like a beautiful butterfly. And
So,
everything.
how old were you when you went in? Because you look pretty young right now.
Oh, well, I'll take that as a compliment. I'm actually 46 years old, and I went in when I was 27.
So
I
you
turned 20. I went in at 26 and turned 27 like a couple months later.
And when you went in, could you help our audience kind of understand what was your mindset like when you first started, when you first were going into the prison? What was the mindset?
Well, it was a horrible mindset. I'm a former, really one of those former street guys. The fast money, violence, all those kind of things were encapsulated into my mindset because that's how I grew up. I don't know if you heard of East St. Louis, Illinois, but
I have heard of East St. Louis.
yeah, I had upbringing back and forth between St. Louis and East St. Louis, so I had kind of what you would call quote unquote a street mentality before going into prison.
And when you got there, did that street mentality stick with you for a little while?
No, actually, I had a profound, what they call a profound spiritual experience while I was on the run from the feds, which was a term of 8 months, and that 8 months was worse than any part of the 8 years. So after I had that profound spiritual experience, I went in with an understanding that I wanted to come back better than what I left
So you're saying
when I
you
went in.
excuse me for a moment, but just such a valuable point. Did you say you were on the run for 8 months?
Yes.
So you knew that you were under indictment, but you just went on living as under an alias and things of that sort.
Actually, I didn't have an alias or no passports, nothing fancy. I just dodged the feds, so to speak, for that amount of time.
And how were you supporting yourself? Just by hustling back then?
Still hustling, still doing the wrong thing. I didn't have a job. I didn't have a surplus of money. I was one of those street level dealers that when the floor falls out from under you, you still making it on a small level. So I was just still making by surviving on a small level.
And so then you finally get caught, you get sentenced to 10 years, and you start in a USP or an FCI?
I actually started at an FCI Greenville in Greenville, Illinois.
And when you went in there, Cleveland, did you hear the same kind of message that I heard? And people probably get tired of me saying this a lot, but I used to hear this message a lot. It didn't matter if I was in a USP, county jail, FCI, didn't matter. I always heard the best way to serve time is to forget about the world outside and just focus on your time in prison. You heard that?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. That was what everybody. That's what people like to say. But I mean, you carry your mind and your heart with you to prison. It's just locked up.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
yeah, I tried that. It didn't work. It took some adjusting. It took like 2, 3, maybe 4 years before I had fully adjusted to being able to figure out that I was powerless and leave everything behind and work on me. I was working on me during those first 4 years, but I was able to get to that place after a while. It took some adjusting.
So we'll get into that whole adjustment, but what would be great, I think, for the people who are just kind of starting off with us is if you tell us about the career you're leading right now, because I know you've got a leadership position in the community.
Yeah.
Tell us about
So
that.
so I actually can. Is it okay if I tell you about my first job out of prison?
I appreciate the better you can tell. What I'd like you to think about, we're talking to you and me when we were still locked up because we all want to
Okay.
know what's it like on the other. There's a lot of talk in there, a lot of happy talk about how easy it's going to be. They're going to get out and everybody's going to have a fancy car and a fancy house and they can't buy commissary right now, but they know everything's going to fall into place when they get out. My job is to not give them nonsense, but to tell them, hey, what do you have to do to become successful when you come home? And the more people I can profile, the more I can help people see you've got to prepare for success after prison. And
Absolutely.
so please tell us about your experience when you got out.
Okay, so to back up just a little bit before I always tell people you have to make a decision of what you are not going to do and be willing to do whatever you can to be successful. And what I mean by knowing not what you're going to do, I knew that I didn't want to go back to selling drugs. I knew that I didn't want to hang around people that were committing crimes. I knew that I didn't want to go back to the old neighborhoods with the old, all that. I had already convinced myself that I didn't want to do that. So come the day that I get out, I actually went to another city besides my home city because I didn't want people having access to me. I didn't want friends that were still doing wrong or family that was still doing wrong to be able to just easily drop by on me and have any kind of percentage of a negative influence on me. So I went to another city and I was in the halfway house and I thought I was going to have a driver's license. I didn't. So I had to ride a bicycle, 2 wheels when I first got out. I used to ride that bike for about 80 to 100 miles per week to make it to 2 jobs while I was in the halfway house. My first job was at Subway. I was a sandwich maker, and being fresh home, I was in that apron, and I was the happiest sandwich maker that they had. I washed dishes, I cleaned the floors, and I actually ended up becoming assistant manager at the Subway. Because I was just dedicated to working hard. Because I had waited all those years to be able to be free and to have an opportunity for success. So I was the greatest sandwich maker, sandwich artist that Subway had ever seen.
Yes, sir.
Yes, that was my
And
first
it's
job.
that attitude, right, that makes all the difference. There's a lot of people in prison that have a level of arrogance where they said, I would never go and take a job like that. That's a kid's job. They don't want to do it. But they don't realize that if you can differentiate yourself and distinguish yourself, even on a job like any job, you can put yourself on a pathway to new opportunities. As you
Absolutely.
found, coming on as a sandwich maker and then becoming a manager.
Absolutely.
Tell us about the rest of the journey.
So the rest of the journey, I end up coming back home because I wanted to be closer. After a while, I wanted to be closer to my grandmother and children because my grandmother raised me. So I moved back to St. Louis, and I lived with my stepfather. And I got a job at a company that made parts for solar power windmills, and I hated that job. I mean, I literally hated it, but I had to do it.
Was this after Subway?
This was after Subway.
Okay.
I left the city where I was working at Subway, and I was cleaning the coffee house as well in Columbia, Missouri at that time. But I left both of those jobs to come back home to St. Louis to help take care of my grandmother who had aged. So I ended up getting a job. My first job was selling extended car warranties. And I didn't like that job because they wanted you to be mean to people on the phone. So make a long story short, I worked at a company.
Wait a minute. They want you to be mean to people on the phone?
Yeah, they really wanted me to drive home these extended warranties that people really don't need.
So they want you to be a cold closer.
Yeah, so I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
Little old ladies on the phone and stuff like that. So I was no good with that. And I ended up getting fired from that job and got hired the next day at a restaurant. So that so you see the kind of jobs that I'm going to. I'm going with whatever would accept me at that time. And I was the happiest person waiting on tables and bussing tables, cleaning up, and just kept that attitude until I found another job, uh, in which was the job I didn't like, but I was there for about 14 months. And then I got the call to go to General Motors.
How did
And I
that
went,
happen? Tell us about, well, in the other jobs that you applied for, when they asked you if you had a criminal background, how did you respond?
I always responded with the truth. Yes, and my conviction was from 2005, so I was able to say that my conviction was 2005. But if they asked, had I been released from prison in the last 5 years, I would have to say yes. But for the most part, everyone knew my background at every job that I ever had.
And did
The
they
people,
did it ever like make them prejudiced against you? Did you experience that concept of we don't want a felon working here?
uh, I was kind of prepared for that, because I was 36 when I came home. So I was prepared to be, doubted and have people doubt you. But I had built myself up so strong mentally to where it really didn't matter. I'm the kind of person that really, if it's negative criticism, I really don't listen to it. I love to listen to positive things and things of that nature because I figured out who I am. I've had enough time to figure out my strengths and all this kind of stuff and build up a great mentality. But so they were just surprised. They were surprised how mild-mannered and professional I was. The guy that hired me, he used to say it's just unbelievable to think that when I was leaving there, I was going back to a halfway house and I had just came home from a long prison stay because that's not what I presented to them.
So at some point you applied for General Motors. How did you do that?
Well, I actually was lucky because my uncle worked for General Motors, and at the time they were doing what they call family and friends, to where I can accept a referral and I can go directly in for interview after a phone interview. So that's how I got in there. I got in there from a referral from my uncle.
And so you just did an application. You went to an interview. Tell us about the interview process and when you got the call.
The interview process. Well, I actually got the call I was having the worst day at my job that I was at the time. And I walked to the back to go back to doing some work. And I was like, God, please, you're gonna have to help me in some kind of way because I can't keep doing this. Uh, and I remember sitting my phone down to to go back to work, and it rang, and I picked it up, and it said, "Hey, this is General Motors, and if you're still interested, please be here Monday at 7 a.m."
You were
And
hired? That was it? You were hired?
I was hired. Well, because initially, after I accepted the call from my uncle and told him I wanted to do it, he put me in, and they called and they gave me this phone interview. They gave me this test, probable situations. What would I do in this situation? Do you, that kind of thing. So I did well with that. It was like a 20 to 30 minute interview over the phone. Then on the worst day at the job I was having, I got the call to come on in.
So let's talk about earnings. When you were on that job, which was the worst day, what were you earning? Do you remember roughly?
It was less than $14 an hour. It's like $12 an hour. When
Okay.
I was a sandwich artist, I was only making $7.45 an hour.
And you were happy with that.
Absolutely, because I probably in prison I probably made $5 in a month.
Right.
If- you know,
So you were still living in a halfway house, and there's also some important takeaways. This is something you won't really get, Cleveland, is that you had a 10-year sentence and you did 8, but right
yes,
now they have this thing, the First Step Act, and a lot of people with a 10-year sentence, they might only do 6 years, right? Because
right,
the law has changed. They might do 5 years with they get
yeah,
art, everything falls in line. They might do 5 on 10, but they're complaining about the 5 on 10, not knowing that guys like you had to do 8 on 10 or eight and a
right.
half on 10,
And
right?
I was there. I was there for crack cocaine. So I was there during the time when they changed the law, and I still had to stay. When people who had more time than me were getting called off the yard to go home, I still had to stay with a lesser sentence because I had a mandatory minimum. So yeah,
Yeah,
I've been through that.
you're an example. But what I like to show to people is that you can't control, what's happening in Washington D.C. You can't control what's happening in the district court. What you can control is how you respond to the world. And
Absolutely.
a guy like Cleveland, he had liberty in his mind. So he
Yeah.
knew what he was working for. For a $7 an hour job, he knew was a stepping stone to something else. And even eventually, in a couple of years, he was getting double that, 14.
Yeah.
And then they
Yeah.
called to General Motors. How does the pay scale change at General Motors from 14?
Well, yes, I've been there going on 9 years now, so I'm at what they
No,
would.
when you started.
When I started, it was $15.78.
So it was just a bit of a jump from 12 to almost 16. And what role did they start you at?
I actually was a temp, so I was wherever they put me, but they ended up putting me in a decent department. I was in the paint shop.
Okay.
Yeah, I was in the paint department, so I would have to walk all like a mile from my car to where I would have to work, and I was in the paint shop, and I was happy.
And what were you doing
And
in the paint shop? Were you painting cars?
no, actually, it's so much to do. I was actually doing. I was putting sealer on the hoods. We would pop the hoods of the trucks and the vans, and I would use a tool to put sealant up the side of the hood. That was my first job.
So you start there as a sealer, entry-level job. Could you walk our audience a little bit through about how you progress from an entry-level job to what you're doing now?
Well, yes. With General Motors, I'm part of the UAW, so the jobs that they have a system on how everything works. So once I made permanent, I got moved out of the easy department into the toughest of departments.
How long did it take before you went from temp to permanent?
It took about 9 months.
About 9 months. Did your pay
Yeah.
change when you became permanent?
Absolutely.
Yeah, walk us through those different pay changes and so that people can understand.
I don't remember the exact
More or
amount,
less.
but it increased once it got higher. It went to like $18 an hour.
Okay.
Yes, and then we want a progressive pay scale according to whatever they decided for our contract.
I see.
But I got lucky, and while I was still a temp before I got converted, they were putting up positions for us to bid on. So they put up a position for a team leader, and nobody bidded on the area because it was a tough area. So I went over to the manager's desk like, "Hey, I'm a temp, but I would love to become a team leader. Is it okay that I bid on a position as a temp?" And they said normally we don't allow it, but sure. So I bidded on a position, and I became a team leader in 2015.
And what does a team leader mean?
A team leader consists of where I work closer with management as opposed to somebody that's a job that's assigned strictly to the assembly line. I don't have to do the assembly work. I do repairs. I do paperwork to keep up with the metrics on things that we need to accomplish, like the goals we have set. I have to do paperwork. I have to go to meetings with with management. We call them group leaders. And I basically supervise and serve a team of people who are assigned to the assembly line.
So,
Like if they
so you just described a hierarchy: a team leader, then a group leader, and then what's after a group leader?
Shift leader,
Shift leader.
and business manager. Then it goes on up until maybe 3 or 4 more positions before you get to plant manager.
Wow. And so you started at GM in what year?
2014.
Could you walk our audience who might want to aspire to do something like you? What does that mean in terms of earnings? You hire at 16, next step is 18, and that takes about a year?
Yes, that takes about a year. And then you're on a progressive pay scale where, you get increases progressively, like every 3 to 6 months following until you get up to a certain pay scale. Like now, I'm almost at top pay. My pay is $33.32 an hour.
So,
And
and
that,
and does that include that? So, what about if you work overtime? Do they have overtime in that position?
oh, I love overtime because overtime is time and a half, and anytime I work on the Sunday, which is a Saturday night for me, is I make double time.
So, $66 an hour.
Yes, and on holidays I get luck if I'm able to get in there and work when everybody else is off work, I get triple time.
Trip $99 an hour.
Yes, over Christmas break I worked 5 days where I got triple time each day for 5 days.
So this is so exciting because you've really been able to recalibrate your life, and you've been home for how many years now?
Uh, this April 10th will be 10 years.
10 years.
No,
And
actually 11. I'm sorry. I got out 2012. I'm sorry. It's 2023. It's been 11 years
so you got
coming up.
out what month of 12?
April. I got out April 10th,
So August
2012.
the 13th of 2012, I left the prison and went to a halfway house where I did another year, and I finished in 2013. So we're kind of got out around the same time.
Yes.
And so what have you been doing with your life besides working so hard and building this career, and you've got great benefits and insurance, and I imagine you have a retirement plan and all these things, right? You've kind of caught up with your regular American right now that's been building your life. Tell us a little bit about what you've done and what you've been able to do once you got stability.
Well, I didn't plan on falling in love so soon, but I fell in love with
Yes, sir.
a great woman, and part of my transformation and being a better person started out understanding that I needed to be healed and be a better person for a woman when I moved into those kind of relationships. So it was very important to me once I met the lady and my wife is to be a good husband, a good husband, uh, a good civilian. Those were my aims and goals because I was always wanted to know, can I stick to what I had transformed into on the inside, on the outside. So that was always important to me. And I came home to children that I had left. So the prioritizing and just working was a big deal because I had never been a worker. The longest I had held a job was probably about a year before incarceration. So those were the things that were important to me, to just live a clean life, to stay away from people, places, situations, and circumstances, and just continue to build from there. I'm involved in ministry. I've been a civil and human rights leader for the UAW where I work. I hold a position as treasurer for the NAACP, which I'm hoping to be the vice president for a branch of the NAACP. I recently, over the last couple months, got involved in mentoring youth, at-risk youth that are like 6 to 16 years old. There's about 30 to 35 guys. It fluctuates in the number. So those are some of the things I've been doing. I tried some entrepreneurial endeavors.
Could you tell me about those?
Well, I always in there. I studied a lot of sales and fashion, so I got into doing. I was selling men's ties and a few women's accessories like costume jewelry and things of that nature, because I always wanted to create something to where because I read the book, the five multiple streams of income. That was one of the books that I read in the, and it gave me a blueprint on how to have more than one income source. So I was trying to set up income sources to where I could have money that I work for, have money for my business, and to uh, eventually get into real estate investing.
Have you gotten into real estate or
No,
not
I have
yet?
not. I have not, because I mean General Motors is has been strenuous work for me, and I've tried some things, and COVID shut me down when I was doing great with my retail business. I just haven't gotten back out there, but we worked a 6-day and sometimes 7-day schedule for 6 years from 2015 to 2021. So that was pretty.
Well, let me tell you, if you could make $99 an hour without
Yeah,
having any investment, that's a pretty good business in and of itself. The problem
absolutely.
is life gets we only have so much life.
Right.
So I would really encourage you, Cleveland, and you should, like I told you, there's nothing you can't ask me. We've been out about the same time,
Yeah.
and I would really encourage you to get into real estate
Hmm.
because it's just about taking action. It's about learning and investing in yourself. If you could buy an asset, a house, for example, and just take a down payment, like in St. Louis, what is it? Do you own the house you live in?
No, me and my wife, we actually rent the house
So what are you
that we're
doing
in.
with all of your capital? Are you just saving it in the bank?
I've been investing in cryptocurrency for the last couple
I'm
years,
sorry to hear
and
that.
I'm not. I'm hopeful. I'm
Has it?
very hopeful.
Well, you said you've
Hopeful
been
for
in a couple of
opportunity.
years ago. A couple of years ago it was trading at 50,000 a coin, and right now,
Right.
so
Right. But that
are you in it good? Are you in it in the black or in the red?
I'm actually in the red right now. I'm not in the green,
Uh,
but I'm kind of like. But I have some positions that I'm just holding on to, and I'm looking at them as investments. Either they're going to prosper, or
well,
I'm just
so
going to
think
hold on
about
to them.
this. Think about this, Cleveland, because you're a young man. Okay, I'm an old man compared to you. I'm 59. Okay,
That's not old.
it's not old. I feel super
Yeah,
young,
you
but
look great.
it's still. I gotta tell you, all since I got out of prison, what's been super important for me is to invest in real estate. And the reason that you want to invest in real estate is you could set a goal, right? You could set a goal where it's not inconceivable for you to say, okay, I want to put $25,000 together, right? That's
Hmm.
when you've got stability and you've got a job. You and I both know you might have it right now, or you might say, it's going to take me 6 months, but I'm going to put 25 grand together. Could you do that
Not in 6 months.
in a
Uh,
year?
yeah, maybe a year.
You work
Uh,
hard, you save, you save, you save, you put 25 grand. What does a house cost in the St. Louis area?
a good house, a nice house will cost you anywhere between 300,000 to 750,000.
Okay, what about a house in East St. Louis?
A house in East St. Louis might cost 2,000, six
That's
thousand,
right. It might
eight
cost
thousand.
2,000, 3,000. Do the math on that. Do the
Right.
math on that. Just pause for a moment and do the math on that.
Hmm.
Let's say that you say, okay, I want to buy a house for 10 grand. I want to put 10,000 together and I want to go to East St. Louis and I want to buy a house that sells for say 10 grand. So that's better than a 2,000. It's not a 200, but it's a $10,000 property. And
Right.
you might budget $3,000 in materials to go to Home Depot and repaint it and put new carpeting in there and toilets. That's going to cost you 3. So you're into the whole house for 13 grand. You with me on
Mhm.
that?
Yes.
Now you know that East St. Louis has some bad parts, but it also has people that are working at Starbucks and working at Verizon and working at, Home Depot, and they earn a living, but they can't put money together for
Right.
whatever reason. But they have to live somewhere, right? And
Yes.
what would that house rent for? 500 a month?
Yes. Or more, possibly more if it's a multi-family.
Just no, we're only talking about a $10,000 property, but it's the best
Okay.
$10,000 property in the neighborhood. So you're going to get the best tenant in the neighborhood. If you
Mhm.
could buy that house and you could manage it, you're going to rent it for $600 a month. Just call it $600 a month. $600 a month times 12 is $7,200 a year. In 2 years, you got all your money back, and now you
Plus.
get $7,200 a month for the rest of your life.
Right.
So acquire 10 of those, and you got $72,000 a year coming in while you're working at General Motors. Now, when you step away from General Motors, you still have $72,000 a year coming in.
Absolutely.
That doesn't happen by accident. That happens by making that level of commitment. And I know you can
Absolutely.
do it because you've already got, see, if you take care of Cleveland first, which you've done, you got a great job, got a great family, got a great community service business, right? But
Yes.
but had you start acquiring real estate in 2012, anytime, because you don't even need 10 grand. You could buy it with $5,000 down, or you could buy a $5,000 house, and just
Yeah.
pay for it. Because that is how I got started. I got started in real estate, and that's what allows me to do what I'm super passionate about doing, which is prison reform and advocacy work and so on and so forth. But it's only because I have other businesses in real estate that I'm now able to do that. So I always like to pass that along to people in prison and people who've come out. Don't only think about trading time for money, right? That's what a job is. You're trading your time for money. Take some of that money and find a way to put it into an asset that generates a return. Crypto's nice, it's very speculative, but it isn't kicking you money back every month.
Right.
Whereas real estate, every month you're making $700 a month, $600 a month. Even if you have to borrow money to get the real estate, the income pays the note. Like, I love to buy real estate with debt, because if I borrow, let's say I buy one of those houses for $300,000 that you just described. Okay? That house probably rents for $3,000 a month.
Right.
Right? $3,000 a month is $36,000 a year. If I can buy a house for $300,000, I only have to put $60,000 down. That's 20%. That means I got to borrow $240,000 from the bank. My note on $240,000 is going to be about $2,000, $1,800. So if I have a mortgage of $1,800 and I charge my tenant $2,800, I'm making $1,000 a month while the house is appreciating in value, and simultaneously the debt is coming down.
Absolutely.
It's a sweet spot. Cleveland, get in the real estate game.
Yes.
Cleveland, I really appreciate you. I really appreciate you for sharing your story with people in jail and prison.
Yes.
Because it's super important for me to bring stories like yours of really starting out at Subway, going on to other jobs, leveraging that to get into a career with a major employer where you're getting health insurance and life insurance, I'm sure, and
absolutely,
and a pension to help you when you eventually retire. But you've
not
been
a pension, but I do have a like a 401k, what they call it, a profit sharing plan.
And that's part of your retirement plan, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but I really encourage you to learn about, because you're the perfect guy. You're 46. If you said, okay, I'm going to set a goal of buying one house a year for 10 years, when you're 56, you'll own those 10 properties. By the time you're 66, they're all paid off.
Right.
They're all paid off. And that's going to be a legacy that you can give to your kids. You know? But it'll carry you through life. It made all the difference in my life. And so I like to share that with people. Now, I mean, I just think that you're the right candidate. Being your age, you're already stable. You probably have really good credit. It'd be super simple for you to get into the game.
No, that's been one of my setbacks. I had good credit, but I had some things that happened that were kind of like beyond my control, that and I took a little downward spiral, but I'm recovering from.
Was that before prison or after prison?
This was after. This has been since I've been home.
Well, tell the audience a little bit about that. What happened?
Well, we had a minivan that we were paying for, and they ended up not being able to pay for it, and it was in my name, so that it had gotten repossessed. Because I with my other children, I was always paying child support,
right,
and things of that nature. So paying taxes,
of
course.
Yeah. See, a lot of people don't understand that. They hear you're making $33 an hour. Do the quick math on that. That's about $65,000, $70,000 a year, not counting overtime, right? And they think you're affluent already. But the reality, out of that 75, you're probably only taking home 50, which is only $1,000 a week,
Yes.
And the cost of living, it's hard to get ahead. You know, it's hard to get ahead, and it's easy to get behind, particularly if you buy assets that go down in value that you got to pay for. That's hard. I would just really encourage you to be looking at assets that go up in value that you can control, and then invest your time
Yeah.
on that, you know? So
Well, I could just quickly. My thought process about investing is I look at it like I should have been invested in Microsoft, Facebook, Home
well,
Depot,
you
all these
look at
things I missed in my life.
2012, you got out of prison. That was the recession, you know.
Right,
But hey, hindsight's 2020. It's always easy to look back and say, "Oh, I could have bought that stock I could have bought Apple in 2012 was trading for about probably split adjusted maybe $20, you know,
right.
and today it's selling for 160. So, you know, if you bought
Right.
100 shares for $2,000 back then, today it's worth
Right.
16,000,
Or,
you know.
or if I would have pulled over somewhere and bought $100 worth of Bitcoin that day, they brought
Exactly.
me home.
$100 worth of Bitcoin, you'd be retired. You'd be buying General
Right.
Motors right now, the whole
Yes,
company.
yes.
Yeah. But you know what? We can't
But,
trip over that. But what also we can't do is not say, okay, let me start sowing seeds today for 5 years from now. Because
mhm.
5 years from now, if you bought that piece of real estate and you started learning the real estate market and dealing with tenants, right? In 10 years, you're going to look back at this day and say, well, that was the day that I really changed my life. And I went from being a stable, reliable, dependable worker, an employee, to being the CEO of my life and starting to control assets that go up in value while simultaneously debt is going down. That is the sweet spot to be in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what I'm working towards.
You work towards that, brother, and you keep at it. I
Yeah.
just want to thank you for volunteering your time.
Yeah.
You got off work. What time did you get off work?
6:30 this morning, my time.
And look at him spending time. When I told him we're going to go communicate with people in prison, he said, sure, I'll volunteer. I'd love to do that. And I'm just super grateful to you.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. Thank you so much
Cleveland, I
for
really
having me.
appreciate you. We're going to send this into jails and prisons across America, and people will look to you as a role model. And this is part of the Prison Professors Ministry, and you're now a
Yeah.
prison professor yourself.
Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
All right.